The Galactic Empire was the most powerful force in the known universe. Its fleets had conquered countless planets, its armies had crushed rebellions without effort, and its leaders ruled over billions of species with an iron grip. To them, war was not a struggle, it was routine. They had seen civilizations rise and fall, and none had ever posed a serious threat to their might. But deep in the forgotten records of the Empire, hidden beneath layers of classified information, there existed a warning. It was a message from an ancient alien race, long extinct, left behind as a desperate plea to any who would listen. The message spoke of a world on the edge of the galaxy, a planet inhabited by a species unlike any other. The words were simple, but the fear in them was clear. Never provoke the humans. For centuries, the warning had been ignored, dismissed as superstition. The Empire had conquered countless worlds. Why would they fear a single primitive species? But now, the name humanity had surfaced again. Reports had started to come in from distant sectors, fleets vanishing without a trace, outposts destroyed in ways that defied logic, and whispers of a war that should not have been possible. Grand Admiral Tylan stood in the heart of the Empire's war room, surrounded by his top commanders. The holographic display in front of him showed the latest intelligence reports. The data made no sense. A fleet of Imperial ships had engaged with a small human force near the outer rim. It should have been an easy victory. Instead, the fleet had been annihilated. "This cannot be accurate," one of the commanders scoffed. How could a primitive species destroy an entire battle fleet? Tylan remained silent, his eyes fixed on the reports. He had seen countless battles, had crushed rebellions that thought themselves unbeatable. But this was different. There was no pattern to the destruction. It wasn't overwhelming firepower that had wiped out the fleet. It was tactics, precision, and something even more terrifying: unpredictability. They knew our movements before we made them. Tylan finally spoke, his voice calm but heavy with thought. They baited our forces, split them apart, and destroyed them before they even had a chance to react. Silence filled the war room. For the first time, an enemy had done something no other species had managed. They had outmaneuvered the Empire. A younger officer, his voice full of arrogance, stepped forward. "Grand Admiral, we should send a full invasion force to this Earth. If they dare to resist, we will burn their planet to ash." Tylan narrowed his eyes. That was the mistake so many empires had made before they fell. They assumed strength alone could win wars. But strength meant nothing if the mind behind it was weak. He turned to one of the intelligence officers. "Tell me about these humans. What do we know?" The officer hesitated before speaking. "Not much. They were ignored for centuries because their technology was far behind ours. But they are different. Every species we have conquered follows a pattern. They develop. They fight among themselves. Then they submit. But humans, they never stop fighting. Even when their wars end, they find new battles to fight. Their history is filled with conflict, survival against impossible odds, and victories that should have been defeats." Tylan felt a chill run through him. Wars defined the Empire, but for humans, war was a way of life. Another commander, still skeptical, scoffed. "Even if they are skilled fighters, what can they do against the full force of the Empire? We have conquered species far more advanced than them." The intelligence officer's face darkened. "That is the problem, sir. Every advanced species we conquered fought predictable wars. Humans don't. They adapt. They change their tactics mid-battle. They fight dirty. They use deception, and they don't break." Tylan's fingers tightened into a fist. The ancient warning echoed in his mind. Never provoke the humans. The Empire had ignored it. And now, it seemed, they were about to understand why it had been given in the first place. The room fell into a tense silence until another officer spoke. "Sir, we have intercepted a message from the humans." Tylan's eyes sharpened. "Put it on." The hologram flickered, revealing a human figure. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with something ancient, something no Empire commander had ever seen before. Determination. "This is Captain Elias Carter of the Terran Defense Fleet." The human spoke. "You came to our system uninvited. You attacked without warning. You thought we would surrender. You were wrong." A pause. A quiet moment that carried more weight than any explosion. "You believe you are the strongest force in the galaxy. You believe your empire is eternal. But you have made one fatal mistake." Carter leaned forward, his voice steady. "You have angered humanity. And now, the real war begins." The message cut out. For the first time in his long career, Grand Admiral Tylan felt something he had never known before. Fear. The silence in the Empire's war room was suffocating. The transmission from Captain Elias Carter had ended, but its weight still hung over the gathered commanders. The arrogance in their eyes had dimmed, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. Never before had an enemy spoken to the Empire with such defiance. Never before had a species shown such unshaken confidence in the face of the galaxy's greatest military power. Grand Admiral Paxilon exhaled slowly, his mind racing. He had fought in 100 wars, crushed rebellions without mercy, and destroyed civilizations that had dared resist imperial rule. Yet, something about the humans felt different. Their words were not mere bravado. They were a warning. A younger officer, his voice sharp with frustration, broke the silence. "Sir, we cannot let this stand. We must show them that defiance comes at a cost. The full might of the Empire must be unleashed upon them." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. The arrogance of the Empire was deeply ingrained. They had never known fear. Xylan turned his gaze toward the holographic display of Earth's star system. His fingers traced the paths of his fleets, his mind calculating strategies. "We underestimated them once. We will not do so again," he said, his voice steady. "Deploy the 3rd and 7th Fleet to Earth's orbit. Establish planetary control. No more games." The order was sent. Thousands of warships began their journey toward the small blue planet. The Empire would not allow a lesser species to challenge its rule. But the humans were waiting. Earth's defense forces prepare. On Earth, the mood was different. There was no fear, no panic. There was only preparation. In a secret underground command center beneath the Rocky Mountains, high-ranking military officials and scientists stood gathered around a massive tactical display. Admiral Jonathan Pierce, the highest-ranking officer in Earth's planetary defense forces, studied the incoming enemy fleet with a cold, calculating stare. "They're sending 2 fleets," a strategist muttered. "That's over 50,000 ships." A murmur of tension filled the room. No other species in the galaxy would have dared face such a force. But Admiral Pierce simply nodded. "Good. They think that will be enough." Across the room, Captain Elias Carter, the man who had sent the warning message to the Empire, smirked. "They're coming with overwhelming numbers, assuming we'll panic and surrender." That's their first mistake. A scientist, adjusting a display of Earth's planetary defenses, looked up. "Do we have a plan?" Pierce turned to Carter. "The usual strategy." Carter's smirk widened. Of course. The human plan was not about firepower. It was about outthinking the enemy. The Empire arrives. The Imperial fleets emerge from hyperspace, their massive warships casting shadows over Earth. The sight of the colossal armada would have sent any other species into surrender. But Earth was silent. No distress signals. No panic. Nothing. Inside the Imperial command ship, Grand Admiral Xylan observed the planet. His eyes narrowed. Why weren't the humans responding? "Begin planetary scans," he ordered. His officers worked swiftly, and soon, detailed scans of Earth's defenses appeared before him. What he saw made his confidence waver. The planet had no orbital defenses, no massive war stations, no planetary shields, nothing that should have been able to resist an invasion. Yet, Xylan felt uneasy. It was too quiet. "Sir, we are detecting several thousand human ships launching from the surface, a sensor officer reported. Xylan's brow furrowed. Send a warning. Demand their surrender. Moments later, a reply came through. Captain Elias Carter's face appeared on the main view screen, calm as ever. You really don't get it, do you? He said. This isn't going to be a war. This is going to be a lesson. The transmission cut. Before Thailand could react, alarms blared across the fleet. The humans had made their move. The trap is sprung. From Earth's surface, thousands of small ships streaked into space. They were not warships, at least not in the traditional sense. They were fast, unpredictable, moving in ways Imperial sensors could barely track. The first wave of human fighters did not attack head-on. Instead, they weaved through the Imperial formations, forcing their warships to adjust. The Empire had never faced an enemy that moved like this, erratic, precise, and completely unorthodox. Then, the real attack began. From behind the moon, hidden from Imperial scans, massive railgun platforms fired at near-light speeds. The Empire's shields, designed to absorb energy blasts, were useless against pure kinetic force. Several Imperial ships exploded instantly. At the same time, human ground bases fired stealth missiles loaded with electromagnetic warheads. The Empire's advanced technology relied heavily on centralized ag control. But the humans knew that. The EMPs shut down key systems across the fleet. Xylan watched in horror as his ships stopped responding. Weapons jammed. Targeting systems failed. Communications were lost. In less than 10 minutes, the Empire's superior fleet was in chaos. And the humans had just begun. The Empire's first defeat. The Empire's warships were massive and powerful, but they were not built for asymmetric warfare. The humans fought like no enemy before them, blending ancient war tactics with unpredictable modern strategies. Small human strike teams, equipped with stealth technology, infiltrated Imperial ships. Instead of engaging in full combat, they sabotaged critical systems, turning the Empire's own war machines against them. One by one, Imperial battleships lost control, drifting helplessly in space. The humans did not fight fair. And that was what made them unstoppable. Xylan's hands trembled as he watched his fleet fall apart. His communications officer turned, panic in his voice. Sir, we need to retreat. Xylan's pride screamed at him to refuse, but the reality was clear. They had lost, not because of human numbers, not because of human firepower. They had lost because humans fought wars differently, because humans refused to fight on their enemies' terms. Through the chaos, a final transmission came through. Carter's voice, calm as ever. I told you, this wasn't a war. This was a lesson. Then the Empire's surviving ships fled. For the first time in Imperial history, the mighty war machine had been defeated not by strength, but by strategy. And deep inside Xylan's heart, a terrifying realization formed. The humans had only just begun. The Imperial fleet limped away from Earth, humiliated and broken. Never before had the Galactic Empire suffered such a defeat. Thousands of warships had arrived with overwhelming confidence, prepared to crush a primitive species. Now they retreated in disarray, leaving wreckage behind, and thousands of their own soldiers stranded. It was a disaster unlike any in their history. On the command deck of the Empire's largest battleship, Grand Admiral Xylan stood frozen. His eyes remained locked on the view screen, watching as human ships continued to dominate the battlefield. His mind refused to accept what had happened. How had an underdeveloped species, a race that had never been part of the Empire's military doctrines, managed to humiliate them so thoroughly? It wasn't strength, it was something else. A trembling officer broke the silence. Sir, we have to report this to the Emperor. Xylan turned sharply, his expression darkening. He knew the consequences of failure. He had seen countless admirals executed for far less. The Empire did not tolerate incompetence, and this was beyond incompetence. This was a disgrace. The officer swallowed nervously. Shall I prepare the report, sir? Xylan clenched his fists. How could he possibly explain this defeat? How could he tell the Emperor that the most powerful war machine in the galaxy had been outsmarted by a species that wasn't even considered a threat a few months ago? "Prepare the transmission," he said finally, his voice bitter, "and order all surviving ships to regroup at the nearest outpost. We need to understand what we're up against before we move again." He would not let this be the end. The Empire did not lose. This was not over. The Galactic Council reacts. News of the Empire's failure spread like wildfire across the galaxy. Every major faction, from the proud Zorvans to the calculating Sithari, received the shocking reports. The Galactic Council convened in an emergency session, their vast chamber filled with tension. Representatives of countless species argued, their voices overlapping in chaos. Some were terrified. If humans could defeat the Empire, what could they do to other civilizations? Others were intrigued, realizing that the balance of power in the galaxy had shifted in ways no one had predicted. Finally, Supreme Chancellor Varric, the leader of the council, raised a hand for silence. His reptilian features were stiff with concern. "This is the first time in recorded history that the Empire has suffered such a defeat," he said. "We must determine if humanity is a threat to us all." An ambassador from the Vorak Dominion, a race known for their military might, scoffed. "A threat? They are a warning." The Empire dismissed them as primitives. That was their mistake. We should not repeat it. A Sithari diplomat, her mechanical implants blinking with data, spoke next. "Humans are unpredictable. Their battle strategies are unlike any we have seen. We must be cautious. If we misjudge them, we may face the same fate as the Empire's fleet." The room fell silent. No one had ever spoken of the Empire in such a way before. But now, with undeniable proof of their failure, the illusion of their invincibility was broken. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy was uncertain about who truly held power. The humans strike back. While the Galactic Council debated, humanity was already preparing for the next step. Earth had won a battle, but they knew the war was far from over. The Empire would return, stronger and angrier than before. In underground bases and secret research facilities, Earth's greatest minds worked tirelessly. Weapons were upgraded, ships were enhanced, and strategies were rewritten. But most importantly, humanity refused to wait for the Empire to attack again. They would take the fight to the enemy. Captain Elias Carter, the man who had first spoken to the Empire, stood aboard the UHS Retribution, Earth's most advanced warship. Around him, an elite crew prepared for a mission unlike any before. Admiral Pierce's voice came through the command channel. "You understand what you're about to do." Carter smirked. "We're about to make history, sir." Their mission was simple but audacious. Strike deep into Imperial space, gather intelligence, and, if possible, cripple their infrastructure before they could retaliate. It was suicidal, and that was exactly why they were doing it. As the Retribution and its fleet of stealth ships jumped into hyperspace, heading straight for the heart of the Empire, the galaxy stood on the edge of something new. Humanity was no longer just a rising force. They were becoming a legend. The Imperial fleet gathered in the darkness of space, far from prying eyes. Thousands of warships, battered and humiliated, now stood in formation near an uncharted moon. The commanders, once filled with arrogance, were silent. No one spoke of their defeat at the hands of the humans, but the memory of it burned in their minds. Grand Admiral Xylan stood on the bridge of his flagship, his hands gripping the railing as he watched the holographic display. The humans had done more than just defend their home. They had shattered the illusion of the Empire's invincibility. Reports from the council chambers confirmed what he feared. Other species had started to question the Empire's power. This was unacceptable. The Empire had ruled through fear for centuries, and now that fear was fading. Xylan would not allow it. A low chime echoed through the chamber. A transmission was coming through. The face of Emperor Kelzor flickered into view, his golden eyes burning with displeasure. Xylan straightened, knowing what was coming. The Emperor's voice was cold. Explain yourself. Xylan took a slow breath, choosing his words carefully. The humans were underestimated, Your Majesty. Their defenses were stronger than anticipated, their strategies unpredictable. The Emperor's gaze darkened. You lost thousands of ships. You abandoned soldiers. You ran. The words stung, but Xylan did not flinch. He knew better than to show weakness. We have learned from our mistakes. The next strike will not fail. The Emperor was silent for a moment, then spoke in a voice that sent chills through the room. Do not fail again. The transmission cut off. Across the stars, the humans were not waiting for the Empire's next move. Earth's best minds worked day and night, preparing for what was to come. Factories ran without pause, producing weapons, armor, and ships at an unprecedented rate. Scientists studied every piece of alien technology salvaged from the battlefield, learning, adapting, improving. There was no hesitation, no fear. The message was clear. Humanity was not going to defend anymore. They were going to strike back. Deep in a hidden military base, Captain Elias Carter stood before a group of Earth's finest soldiers. He looked at the faces of men and women who had volunteered for a mission that had no guarantee of survival. We're not waiting for them to come back, he said, his voice firm. We're taking the fight to them. The room was silent, but the fire in their eyes spoke louder than words. Humanity was no longer the hunted. They were about to become the hunters. The Imperial fleet moved carefully through deep space, their warships drifting like silent predators. Admiral Xylan stood at the command deck of his flagship, staring at the holographic projections before him. He had given the orders. An overwhelming force would strike the human colonies first, cutting them off from their homeworld. It was a flawless plan. The humans had proven dangerous, but they were still a young species. They had no empire, no vast resources, no centuries of war experience like the Empire. They would be crushed. His officers moved around him, executing commands without question. They were trained for war, for destruction. This time, there would be no retreat. Far away, hidden from Imperial sensors, a single human warship drifted in the void. The Vanguard, Earth's most advanced warship, remained cloaked in the shadow of a dying star. Inside, Captain Elias Carter stood in the war room, surrounded by his officers. The mood was tense but focused. We're not waiting for them to strike first, he said. We take out their supply lines, their command posts. We make them bleed before they even reach us. The officers nodded. They knew what was at stake. The Empire was larger, stronger, but they had weaknesses, overconfidence, outdated tactics, and most importantly, they believed humanity was still on the defensive. They were wrong. The first attack came swiftly. The Vanguard and a fleet of specially designed stealth ships emerged from the darkness of space, targeting an Imperial supply depot. The station, heavily guarded but not expecting an attack, erupted into chaos. Explosions tore through its structure as human strike teams breached the interior, planting charges and cutting off communications. The Imperial officers inside barely had time to react before the entire station was engulfed in fire. The Empire had lost a crucial supply hub in a matter of minutes. It was only the beginning. Word of the attack reached Admiral Xylan quickly. He watched the reports in silence, his jaw clenched. Impossible, he muttered. The humans should not have been capable of such precision, such ruthlessness. This was not a desperate defense. It was a calculated offensive. His officers murmured nervously around him. For the first time, fear crept into their voices. The humans had done more than strike a military target. They had sent a message. One by one, Imperial outposts began to fall. Fuel depots exploded in sudden, coordinated attacks. Command ships vanished from their formations, ambushed in deep space. Key officers were assassinated. The Empire, which had crushed countless civilizations under its rule, was now being hunted. And the worst part, they didn't know how the humans were doing it. Imperial warships began to hesitate. their movements cautious, their strategies breaking apart under pressure. Tylan knew what this meant. The humans had done something no other species had ever achieved. They had put fear into the hearts of the Empire's finest warriors. Meanwhile, on Earth, the leaders of humanity watched the reports with grim determination. The war was far from over, but they had already achieved what they needed. The Empire was no longer an unstoppable force. It was bleeding, and humanity was not done yet. Deep in the command center of the Imperial fleet, Admiral Tylan stood motionless, his claws gripping the edge of the control console. Reports kept pouring in. Supply stations lost, entire battalions cut off, high-ranking officers assassinated. The Empire had faced countless enemies before, but never like this. The humans were not fighting a war of attrition. They were striking with precision, tearing apart the Empire's infrastructure piece by piece. And worse, no one saw them coming. Imperial warships patrolled in tight formations, scanning for any sign of human ships, but there was nothing. They were fighting ghosts. The tension aboard the flagship was suffocating. Officers whispered among themselves, their usual discipline breaking apart. Fear was a sickness spreading through the ranks. Tylan knew it well. He had seen this happen to other civilizations before the Empire crushed them. But this time, the fear was within their own fleet. He could sense it in the way his officers hesitated before speaking, in the nervous glances they exchanged when another report arrived. The humans had done something no other enemy had ever managed. They had turned the hunters into the hunted. Far away, hidden in the vastness of space, the vanguard prepared for its next strike. Captain Elias Carter stood at the bridge, watching the enemy fleet through the ship's advanced scanning systems. "They're nervous," he muttered. "They don't know where we'll hit next." His officers nodded. They had seen the same thing. Imperial ships moving erratically, their formations breaking apart, their confidence shattered. That was the plan all along. The humans didn't have the numbers to fight the Empire head-on, but they didn't need to. Fear was their greatest weapon. The next attack came without warning. In a distant star system, an Imperial command post suddenly lost contact with its fleet. Moments later, the station's reactors detonated, leaving nothing but burning wreckage. Nearby Imperial ships turned in panic, searching for an enemy that had already vanished. Elsewhere, human strike teams infiltrated another Imperial base, disabling its defenses before slipping away undetected. Every attack was precise, every target chosen carefully. The Empire was used to overwhelming its enemies through sheer force. But against humanity, brute strength meant nothing. Admiral Tylan clenched his fists as yet another report came in. Another warship missing, another base lost. He had underestimated the humans. He had ignored the warnings. And now, the Empire was paying the price. But he was not ready to admit defeat. "Prepare the fleet," he growled. "We will crush them. No more games." His officers saluted, but he could see the doubt in their eyes. The war was no longer going as planned. And deep down, Tylan feared that it never would. Meanwhile, aboard the Vanguard, Carter watched the enemy fleet shift into new formations. The Empire was adapting, but it was too late. The damage had already been done. The humans had broken their enemy's spirit. Now, they would break the Empire itself. The Empire was collapsing faster than anyone had expected. What had begun as a simple conflict had turned into a nightmare for the once mighty galactic rulers. Entire fleets were retreating, supply lines were cut, and the once loyal commanders of the Imperial forces now hesitated before engaging. The humans had done what no other species had managed. They had shattered the illusion of Imperial invincibility. Admiral Tylan sat alone in his darkened chamber aboard the last remaining command ship. His claws tapped against the metal table as he read the latest reports. More losses, more defeats, more signs of collapse. He could feel the end closing in, a slow and suffocating inevitability. The Empire had ignored the warnings. They had laughed at the primitive species from a backwater world. Now the humans had become their worst nightmare. He activated a holographic display, staring at the latest intercepted transmission from human forces. A simple message played over and over across Imperial channels. "You should have listened." The words echoed in his mind. He had dismissed the early warnings, ignored the scattered reports of human resilience. He had been so certain of victory, convinced that the humans would crumble under the might of the Empire. But he had been wrong. Terribly, catastrophically wrong. Elsewhere, Captain Elias Carter stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, watching as the last remaining Imperial strongholds fell one by one. What had once been the most feared military power in the galaxy was now reduced to scattered remnants, desperately clinging to their dying empire. Humanity had not just won the war, they had rewritten the balance of power in the galaxy. Carter turned to his officers, his voice calm but firm. "This is only the beginning," he said. "The galaxy will never forget what happened here, and they will never underestimate humanity again." Across the stars, the message was clear. The war was over, the Empire was finished, and every civilization in the galaxy now understood one undeniable truth: you never enrage humanity.